Welcome to Ridgecrest Talk. I'm your host, Tonia Pyle, with my guest today, Linda Paine, from the founder and president of Elections Integrity Project. Linda, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to get updated on your Elections Integrity Project. I know you've been working on it. You said it'll be 5 years in December?
Right. That's
okay.
correct.
So a lot is going on, but for our viewers, I want to start at the beginning, as I mentioned, and I'd love for you to tell how someone in your community had you discovered there's a voter problem with. Tell us about what happened.
Okay. Well, up until 2010, I was just a regular voter. And we had an incident happen in my community, Santa Clarita, where a friend of mine, her young son was a freshman at college, went to vote for the first time mid-afternoon, went through the process of checking in, and was told right off the bat that he had already checked in and voted. And he said he had not. This was his first time. And sure enough, when you look down to the third book, there was a signature, not his signature. But we learned that someone was able to impersonate him and vote in his place with a regular ballot. So he was left to vote with a provisional ballot.
Is that what happened? Okay. So they did let him vote.
Right. In California and across the nation, they have to allow you to vote. But the difference between a regular ballot and a provisional ballot is the provisional ballot must be scrutinized to make sure that you are indeed that person. A regular ballot, once you go through check-in, that vote counts. So the person who impersonated him, that vote counted, even though he broke the law and impersonated a voter. The real voter had to be checked to make sure he was himself. Now, chances are his vote did count, but the concern is someone who was not that person, his vote also counted.
So this was huge. And what did you and your friend do at that point?
Well, we were part of a larger effort in the southern counties. We had gone out to observe the polls, and so we touched base with one another to see what happened in the southern counties and learned that a huge incident took place in San Diego County, where a very popular candidate who had support of Democrats, Republicans, declined to state.
Right.
The polls indicated that he was going to win by a landslide. At 10 minutes till 8, the media showed up at his headquarters where they prepared for a victory party and asked how the candidate felt about losing the race. His campaign manager said, well, it's 10 minutes till 8 for one, and the polls indicate he's going to win by a landslide. So the media said, well, we'll wait. Well, the interesting thing is at 8 p.m., that race was called, and he did indeed lose the race. So at that point, we knew something is terribly wrong because we had observers out there who saw issues of concern, but at that time we didn't know what the election laws were, so we didn't know what's right, what's wrong. But one of the concerns we saw in San Diego that we think may have led to that was an incident where two poll watchers, these are people who watch the polls on behalf of candidates, were observing a poll and observed a busload of people come up and go through, check in and vote with vote by mail ballot, then go back to the bus, pick up a second vote by mail ballot, and go through again and vote again. Can't cast to be able to drop the not vote by mail ballot, I'm sorry, sample ballot. So on the sample ballot, you have a name and an address. So that alarmed us to think, well, why would the people working in the poll not have recognized the faces going through when these two young men did? At that time, we did not know how to document what we were observing, but we were concerned enough that we decided we'd better call an election law attorney and alert somebody who could stop the call of the race or do a recount or something. After 40 minutes of having a conversation with her and sharing with her the various issues that we saw, she basically said the candidates and the parties cannot fix this because the minute they try to, it will become politicized and it'll fall flat. But she did say there is a problem. Both parties know there's a problem. But if it's going to be fixed, it would have to be a citizen effort. It would have to be nonpartisan, and the level of integrity by which the project would take place would have to be without question. So we hung up the phone with the attorney, and amongst the 4 women, 2 from San Diego, 1 from Riverside, and myself from LA counties, basically said, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And so we decided to move forward and see what we could do. I contacted True the Vote, which is an organization out in Texas. Mm-hmm. They had already been doing something like this, and spoke with them, got on a conference call, and said, we know something's terribly wrong in California. We don't know what it is. We're rookies, but would you mentor us and help us get started in California and teach us what you're doing in Texas so that we can figure out what's going on? And she did, and that began our steps moving forward of establishing the Election Integrity Project in California.
Mm-hmm. So now, the woman in your community whose son had already been, his voter place was taken.
Right.
Were you part of a group together? I mean, when you said you took a group down to San Diego. Did this happen because of this woman's son, or what got you involved? Because you said you were just an average voter, but now you're very much involved.
Well, we began networking with groups.
Who's we?
We were part of a Tea Party group when the big 2009 the Tea Party started. Well, I'd never been involved in politics at all, mm-hmm. and I thought, well, this TARP is going on, and what's happening? And so I got onto American Family Association and said, well, if there's something going on in Santa Clarita, I'll help. And then all of a sudden they posted, Linda Paine starting something. It was like, ha! So, no, I'm not, I'll help. But as it turned out, we all decided, you know what, let's just get out and protest this spending spree, and let's see what we can do. Well, it turns out people all over the state were doing it, and we started networking with each other in the southern counties. And we began to hear about the water crisis in the Central Valley. And we began to question, why weren't we even aware that there was a water crisis? How did we not know they were going to shut the water off to our farmland? We decided, you know what? Let's start to meet together. Okay. And so we began to come together every 2 weeks from all the southern counties in Pasadena and compare notes.
All right, sounds good. Well, we'll be back in just a moment to find out where this led and where we're going.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
You were talking about how you were part of a Tea Party group. This is a very conservative group, but I think your husband is actually registered as a different party than you are.
Correct.
So this is not a partisan
No.
Project. It's something that he is as committed to as you? Or?
He is more in a background setting, but you're absolutely right. This is a nonpartisan effort, and in fact, in Santa Clarita, the effort with that very first Tea Party rally, it was just people. We had 1,700 people come out to that rally.
Oh.
These were business owners. These were families. This had nothing to do with politics.
This was a water issue.
This was just a spending issue. The federal government was spending so much, businesses were concerned. So we really thought, well, we're just going to hawk it up. We're going to do this rally, and Congress is going to change their mind and realize that people aren't happy and go back to being fiscally conservative. So, of course, that didn't happen, and so we began to meet again, and as we began to hear about the water issue in Central Valley. And then we began to network with other counties in the southern counties to find out, well, are you having water problems? Are you having water problems? And sure enough, they were. All of the rural parts of the southern counties were having similar problems, with the EPA having various fish or some kind of animal transferred to part of their rural community. And then within 3 years, that little critter then becomes endangered, and after that, the government controls the water. That's correct. So that's how we began, from just regular folks living our lives, beginning to look deeper into what's happening and becoming concerned enough that it really didn't matter what party. It seemed that this was much bigger than political partisanship, although that's always going to happen. But it doesn't matter what party you are. If you can't get water, if you can't keep your business going, we have a problem with our
Right.
government. And that's how we got started.
Okay. All right. So then now you talked to the attorney. The attorney said it has to be a citizen effort. And you folks decided, if not us, who? If not now, when?
Right.
And so how did you begin?
I contacted Catherine Engelbrecht with True the Vote, and she invited me to come to their Texas training in January 2011.
Okay.
So I got on a plane and flew down there and went through their training and realized it's a fabulous training, but Texas is not California. And we were going to have to figure out how to do this in California. And in fact, True the Vote supports and mentors, but says you need to know your own state laws because every state is different. So that's how we started. I began traveling around the southern counties, speaking with groups and sharing what we had observed and asking, would you join us with the Election Integrity Project to observe the polls in 2012? So we figured we had 2 years to somehow build this organization. It had never been done before, so there was no blueprint. We just had to figure it out as we went. But we found people in huge numbers saying, yes, we'll help. So I began to establish my board, and on my board I had a retired attorney, a retired paralegal, data analysts, people involved in, these were all retired, who'd retired from companies where they knew how to audit, and I mean, these were very professional people.
Yes.
We met together, and my board member, who's the paralegal, brought for each of us a big, thick book that is the California election law codes. She
Oh,
set them
boy.
down and she said, first thing we need to do is y'all need to know what's in that book. And we laughed just like that. And she didn't laugh. She said,
Right.
we have to know
Right,
this.
right.
So 2011, we began studying what does the election code say
Right.
about how our polls should function and what are state and federal laws that govern California's elections. So to know if we're compliant, we had to first know what they are. So that's what we did in 2011, was study the law and travel across the state, letting people know we want to build a team in each county. And we did. By 2012, we had teams in 21 counties, from Shasta in the north to San Diego in the south, from the
Wow.
Bay Area to the Nevada border and all through Central California. And we were prepared by the primaries to have citizens trained in those election codes to go to the polls, observe, and document what they saw, and then bring that information back to us. Our documentation goes on an incident report that the bottom says, I declare under penalty of perjury that what I have listed here is true and accurate. So that changed what we saw in 2010 from anecdotes where someone could say, yeah, you don't know what you saw, to a legal document which could be used for any kind of legal action. And that became our goal. If indeed there was corruption and wrongdoing, we wanted to be able to build a case against whoever was destroying the integrity of California's elections and fix it and restore that integrity.
So you don't approach the situation there at the polls and go up to somebody and say, you can't do that.
Correct.
You logged it and notated it that would meet the code requirement for some type of action, or at least bringing something into question through the elections office, or who do you work
So
with?
here's how it works. We provide a 4 to 5 hour training for every citizen who comes. We provide a election day issues handbook, which notes the issues that show up in polls with the correct code and description of what should be happening. We have a training manual. And in California, we are actually one of the few states that allow citizens to observe every aspect of the election process and to ask questions. So we train our observers. They cannot interfere with the election process in any way. So they're to be kind of a fly on the wall. They cannot observe the table with all the election material and voter information. What we train them to do is simply approach the inspector. That's the head person at the poll. And we have them come away from the table, and we train them to say, the procedure I just observed is not consistent with my understanding of the law. We're not attorneys, so we can't file anything, but we understand what it says, and then we say, can we show you what it says? We have found probably 90% of inspectors say, why wasn't I trained in the law? I didn't know this. And they want to do the right thing, so they make adjustments to what they're doing to actually follow the code. We then take a report of everything that is observed, and we provide it to the registrar voter of that county. We don't have the authority to make changes, so we give that research to the registrar who does have the authority to make changes.
Okay. Well, we'll be back in just a minute to hear more about how your foundation progressed.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk with Elections Integrity Project founder and president Linda Paine. Now, you mentioned that one of the women you approached, the inspector of the officers at that poll, had said that she hadn't been trained in that, and that kind of surprised me because it was in the mid-90s when I did a similar position. I don't remember exactly my official title there, but I was a poll person, and we were trained so well. So I'm surprised that, what county was that?
Well, let's talk about the distinction, because you're exactly right. The poll workers get training on basically the logistics of where to put the booths, how to handle check-in, that type of thing. They get about a 2 to 2.5 hour training. What they don't include in the training is the law behind the training. So we see really very good people in the polls really doing the best they can. We have identified in some polling poll worker teams that are not having the highest level of integrity, but by and large, most precinct board members are absolutely doing the best they can and the right thing. But not knowing what the law is behind it, very often you have very organized people who say, well, why are we doing it this way? Let's do it this way instead. It might be better, it might be faster. And by not knowing that there's a law that tells them what they need to be doing, they just are doing the best they can. That's what we learned.
I think one thing that comes up to mind is I remember that there was someone in the line that had a picture of someone or maybe a button or something. And you really have to approach those people and tell them you can't do that here, because there's a matter of footage that at that point you can't have anything that is political, because it's known that the last thing people see, they might at the last minute go, well, okay, I saw that, maybe that's how I should vote. And that's why they have those laws.
Correct. We found the #1 law that is not followed, and in fact is the only law in our election code book that protects voters from being impersonated, like this young man was, is the check-in procedure. The law states that the voter must initiate the transaction, so to speak. So as the voter, I come in and I must say, my name is Linda Paine. And then that clerk looks up in the book for my name and sees that it's there, and that's it. Then I go to the next clerk and I must initiate. I live at, and I give them my address, and they do repeat it back. The first clerk too says Linda Paine. So it's an audible repeating of what I just said. Then I go to the next step, which is supposed to be a blank line where I must write in my address. Because if I'm me, no matter how tricky my name is to say, I can say it, I know where I live, I can write it, and then the fourth step is I sign the book, and then I get a ballot. The law has not been changed, but the procedure has been, and the procedural change came from the Secretary of State so long ago that the county registrars just follow that. The way it's done now is the first clerk reaches out to take your sample ballot or any little slip of paper, 3x5 card, whatever it is, with a name and an address. They take that, and so without saying a word, I can take your name, Tonia Pyle, write your name, write your address, walk into your poll, and hand them that piece of paper. The clerk looks at it, finds you in the book, takes that piece of paper, hands it to the next clerk who looks for your address, finds it in the book, checks it off, and now those blank slates are now pre-printed, so I don't have to memorize where you live. It's pre-printed. I just take the pen and I sign it, and that's what happened to the young man in Santa Clarita. We have seen how this happens in our 4.5 years of work. Hanging outside of our polls is what's called a street index. And on the street index is the name and address and phone number of the voters in that precinct. The reason for that is so people can help them get out the vote. You haven't voted yet, let me come pick you up. But what's happening is those who have a willingness to manipulate the system and cheat go to those street indexes, write down names and addresses, and then they just take either 3x5 card where they have it on and go to either the poll where that person is listed and do what I just explained, or they go to a different poll. And we saw large numbers of people from between 4 and 6 going into polls with a piece of paper, a name and an address on it, without a word, handing it to the first clerk who says, oh, you're not on our list. Go over to the provisional ballot table. And there I take your information, I write it on a provisional envelope, I get the ballot is the same as the regular ballot, they don't look any different. I go vote, I put it in the provisional envelope, and now I get to vote.
And this could happen in huge numbers if someone is purposed to be subversive.
Correct.
Wow, this is a huge undertaking.
It is, and it takes thousands. In 2012, we trained about 2,000 citizens across the state in 21 counties to go to the polls, observe, document, approach the inspector when we see people pull down that street index, which is illegal, but inspectors are not taught that that's illegal. But an observer sees it happen, they can go to the inspector and say, someone has just pulled down the index and they're sitting in a circle on the ground, they pulled it apart and they're writing down names. Then they can show them in the code, they're not allowed to do that. That gives the inspector authority then to go and say, absolutely not, pull that back together, it stays on the wall. So that has, by having citizen observers equipped with the law, go to inspectors, show them the law that has equipped the inspectors to protect that poll from manipulation. Mm-hmm. So we see the importance of knowing the law, and we have approached the Secretary of State in 2013 and asked them to consider increasing their level of training to train the precinct board members and the inspectors in the law the way that we do. And at that time, her staff said, well, if people had to come for more than 2 hours, they just wouldn't come. And we just don't agree with that. We have a 4-hour training, and people come and are thrilled for the training, and the inspectors often will say to our observers, do you have an extra book? Or if our observers, their time is up, they're leaving, they'll say, please, can you send someone else? They want to be equipped with the law, so we don't agree that they won't come. We think they'll come in larger numbers.